Welcome back to the Paradigm Project.
We did eat Vegemite toast for breakfast the whole lunch.
I was talking to my mom about comedians.
So we're so grateful to have you here. Oh my goodness. We have two of our Paradigm mentors who used to work here at Paradigm, Stephen Fife and Toby Simmons. We'd love to have both of you tell a little bit about yourselves and a little bit of what you've been doing in the last bit. Let's start with Stephen.
About me, huh? Oh, that's my favorite subject. Let's see. I actually grew up in Cedar City, in a small town called Enoch, and we've moved home. So my kids are going to the same high school that I went to. And before we moved down, my daughter asked if people if they really wore cowboy hats. And she doesn't ask that anymore.
Right.
So yeah, it's been a culture shock for my kids. I feel right at home. I love it. It's been really neat. I live here with my wife and 7 children, 39 chickens, a dog, a parakeet, 2 cats, and more flies than even we had in Eagle Mountain. We moved right next door to a sheep farm. So it's been interesting. And
what a family man right there.
Yeah.
All those chickens.
Oh, dang. Let's hear a little bit about you too, Toby.
So I'll tell you a little bit about my experience at Paradigm. So I was one of the first-year hires. I had a lot of different job offers, but I knew I was supposed to go to Paradigm, even though we had no building, no administrator, and I'm not even sure if they were going to pay us. But we, showed up, pulled up carpet, all that, built our own walls, whatever, to get it started. And then I don't think we really started figuring things out until year 3. And then things just took off. Paradigm became a really special place. So was there for 12 years and then had an opportunity to come to a similar school 5 years younger than Paradigm, but it's built on the same model, same ideals. This one is growing really rapidly. People here in Northern California want something different than what most schools are offering. And so, it's in 5 years, it's gone from about 1,000 students to about 4,000, and we have like 4,500 people on the wait list. So
wow, that's crazy.
But it's it's the same model as what we had in Paradigm, and that's why they invited me out here. My entire job is just coaching teachers on how to lead discussions and get into the classics and read, write, and discuss like we did at Paradigm. So yeah, even though I still miss Paradigm a lot. But it's been really exciting, like new challenges here, dealing with a much larger crowd of people. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. That's cool. I didn't think there'd be that many people like in the world that actually wanted to learn like this, I don't know. It's just so different.
Yeah, it's actually growing. Yeah. And actually, I think Stringfellow Bar hits why this movement is popular in that in this article that we read. So.
Right. Do you want to tell us a little bit of your thoughts on why?
So yeah, when Barr talks about we are starved for true dialogue, that was in 1968 that he said that. If I haven't been along that long, but just in my lifetime, I have seen a decline in our national dialogue.
Right.
He was very much right that we are starved for dialogue, and at the same time, we have lost a lot of our capacity for true dialectic. We have a lot of talking and very little dialogue. So yeah, this kind of education gives that, not just gives, it demands that kind of dialogue. And it's the kind of dialogue where he says, I think it's the first page, there's a pathos in television dialogue. Mm-hmm. And I would say this carries through our news shows, whatever else. The rapid exchange of monologues that fail to find the issue, like ships passing in the night. The reiterated preface, I think that, as if it mattered who held and rather than which opinion is worth holding. That common search for true things, that's what we've lost.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I was thinking that television has gone from, they used to try to do dialogues on television, and I think a lot of older films had a ton of dialogue in them. But you look closer, we're getting away from even talking heads, when you turn on most movies now, it's about the special effects, it's about the fight scenes. Right. It's almost like we've dumbed it down to the point where if it's exciting, then Hollywood will produce it. But if it's going to require any kind of listening to what people are actually saying, then let's not produce it for people to watch.
Do you think that's because like people are just scared to talk about things? Like, is that why dialogue is going away? Because there seems to be a lot of taboo around like certain subjects like politics and like religion and like even money sometimes and like just a whole bunch of other things. So are people like afraid to have a conversation that's like meaningful?
I don't think it's a fear.
Lincoln said that the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation is the philosophy of government in the next. And I think our schools get us ready to be really good taskmen, taskwomen, like do what we're being told to do. And so you do that all day and you're fed up with it. You don't want to just obey anymore. So you go home and you unwind. And what do? You sit in front of YouTube or whatever you do to kind of unwind. And it's really disheartening, and I think it underestimates the power that people have to either tell them what to do and then expect them to obey, like we do in our schools, and not expect them to think for themselves. And then when we get out into the real world, we just want more of that. People who think rock the boat, and you can't run a successful business off a bunch of people who are thinking and questioning what you say and do, right?
I think it also ties into our society today. It just loves easy things and quick things. And that's like, we're taught to be kind of cogs in a clock or whatever, and do specific jobs. But it's also partially because that's what's easy in society. And so we don't look for quality dialogue because it's not easy to give quality dialogue. And it's not easy to do that searching, do the finding, do the research, do whatever. And society's just not used to it.
Plato has another analogy he uses. Is that in the Apology? Where he talks about the statue, Simmons? He compares knowledge, or he talks about these statues before he compares it to anything. Do you remember this one? Where he says, there are statues in the Agora, and some of them are stolen. The ones that are stolen are chained down, or not stolen are chained down. And he said that opinions are like statues that don't have chains holding them down. But knowledge is like a statue, this beautiful thing that's chained down. And yeah, when you buy into an ideology, it's really easy to listen to somebody and figure out, oh, yeah, that person has about 3 axioms that they're basing all of the things that they believe on, right? And like, I can predict what they're going to say.
Right.
Either, like a Marxist ideology would be economics is the root of all evil, and that's where all of our problems are coming from, right? And on the other hand,
right.
So what am I saying? That would be like an opinion that's not chained down. 1 minute somebody listens to their expert or the person that they're getting all of their words from, and then they just repeat those and recycle those same debates over and over.
Something we were talking about in our pre-discussion was how like social media is kind of just getting a whole bunch of people to agree with you. And if they don't agree with you, then you like block them, you unfollow them, or the literal algorithms of these apps will just take away that topic or stuff away from you. And so I don't think that's helping it in any case with this dialogue and this communication, because like if you want to learn and you want to grow, you need to be diving into every form of dialogue and then you like finding what's right, if that makes any sense.
That does, and I kind of want to say a little bit about that. And Stringfellow Barr talks about that in this article because he goes back to the opening of Plato's Republic with Thrasymachus and Socrates speaking. Because Thrasymachus's concern is about winning, about upholding his status as a sophist. He can lose a discussion, while Socrates, because he's starting from a place of not knowing the answers, but at the same time, that's the first element that's needed, is to be open to be open that you might not know. But the second is a belief that through searching and questioning that you will come to a better understanding. In our modern society, we've lost both of those elements that are necessary for a good dialectic. We've adopted a relativistic view of truth. It's even unpopular to say that there is truth now. But if there isn't an answer that we can come to that matches reality, then what are we to look for? If there's no truth to be found, or even getting closer to truth, what we're left with is just what's interesting, or what we prefer, or what we like. And so Stringfellow Bar actually mentions that, like pluralism, he says it's only minimally better than shooting each other over differences.
Right.
But he says the agreement to disagree is a disgraceful defeat if it means surrendering the hope of agreement through further dialectic. So, so on top of our loss of ability to dialogue, we've also adopted some ideas and intellectual paradigms that get in the way of dialectic. We can't talk together in pursuit of an answer if none of us believe there is an answer to be found.
The whole idea of pluralism is that there are two number ones. The etymology was you couldn't have, or pluralism was having two positions in the church. So the cardinal and the pope, you can't do both of those at the same time. And priorities, the word priority used to actually mean one. It didn't mean priorities. We've only pluralized that word in the last 100 years. And now people are like, what are your top priorities? Well, no. When you, before that, there was a priority.
Right.
And people believed in things like, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and hold to the other, or a double-minded person is unstable in all their ways. When you have a priority, which in this case is truth, you're not waffling on every pluralistic idea that comes along and saying, oh, yeah, that sounds really good, I believe that. And oh, this sounds good, and I believe that. We only want to pull up one side of the stick, so to speak. But we're holding all of these sticks on one side, and meanwhile, what we're holding on to on the other end.
Well, when you were talking about priorities, I thought that was interesting. I'd never thought about it that way, that like priority versus priorities. And he actually talks about that when he's saying he listens with all five senses and with the mind's eye. So like a singular priority, you'd be 100% invested into this one thing, right? And if you have multiple things going on, you can't give 100% to one of them. It's like listening to music while doing the dishes. You can't focus on the music and do the dishes at the same time, or at least give 100% to either one. So you could like listen to some parts of the music or only wash some parts of the dishes. You're only like, you're splitting in half. You can't give 100% to both chores. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Going back to just what Simmons said, I think that with society going down and not being willing to dialogue as much, it kind of reminds me a lot of Fahrenheit 451, or through this questioning, Guy Montag gains a better understanding.
Yeah, no, it's I think that's one reason a lot of us have really come to love learning in a classical way. There are perspectives and an ability to see things more clearly that comes out of a good dialogue or discussion that you can't get on your own.
Right.
To cut ourselves off from that is really sad. And you see that in Fahrenheit 451 and other similar books, that societies where everything becomes focused, where every person becomes focused on entertaining or distracting themselves, they lose the benefits of investing fully or making priority of that search for answers and perspectives from dialogue with other perspectives from other people.
Right.
Going back to the philosophy of the schoolroom and the philosophy of the government, that we're penalized for dialogue in a lot of modern education. We call it cheating, right? If you talk to somebody and then the teacher overhears you, oh, what are you guys doing? Are you cheating? Like rip up the test, you guys have to do this apart from each other. But the whole idea of dialogue is, I can't think about something until I speak with someone. And maybe that is with myself. Some people are able to sit down and write and create something more. But even someone like Tocqueville, who he spent all of his time in America, supposedly, just just writing and observing. I don't think that's the case. I think he was out talking. There are accounts of him talking to the best statesmen in America, and he's like, oh, I put my ear really close to the ground, and this is what they're saying. And then he's taking the ideas that he's hearing from these dinner parties and these one-on-one discussions, and he's putting it together in his book. But I don't know.
If I could just add to what you were saying with that. Yeah, when you read through his letters and travel notes, people always say things like, wow, how did he gain such a clear perspective of America in just 7 months of travel? Really, his book is the outcome of a dialogue with a couple hundred of the best minds in America at the time. Tocqueville, his genius was that he was a great conversationalist.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I was listening to one guy he has millions of followers on YouTube, and his videos are absolutely dry, right? And they're just philosophy for the most part. Not completely dry, but he's got millions of followers because he knew what people were interested in. And so he went out and he's like, I use this social media format, and I was looking at what people were talking about, and then I tested it and I tried writing some of my own things. He's to the point where he's creating content that's worthy of dialogue. So I think it exists. I know I came down pretty hard and like, oh, people just want to obey, but there are people out there doing this that understand that dialogue is not just repeating the 3 or 4 axioms of your ideology, but actually thinking for yourself and starting to really work through some pretty challenging ideas that in a lot of ways, what you guys are doing, if Paradigm really does what it's meant to do, it's kind of a scary thing. This idea of dialogue, it takes you on an adventure that is terrifying. This is not soft and easy. It will require hard and strong of everyone who really engages in this. But it really is an adventure, right? And most of us would rather not leave our safe little hobbit holes for this kind of an adventure. So how do you avoid it? Well, if you go to Paradigm and you don't do the readings and you don't get yourself ready for a discussion and you don't understand the text, you haven't listened with your mind's ear, then you can be in the same place as someone else who's doing all of those things, and none of it will rub off on you. You can be in as many discussions as you want, and you will never get the same experience. You will not go on the adventure. You won't have the crisis that requires all of you to give in order to, like, part of you has to die. In order for that to happen, you have to be on the adventure for death to happen before you can start rebuilding yourself into something amazing.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah. Just like what you said in the classroom, Stringfellow says, we yearn not always consciously to commune with other persons, to learn with them by joint search. And it was just very similar to what you were saying. So, and that is the great conversation, really.
It is scary. And that's why we say, as Stringfellow Bar points out, there's some conversations we don't want to approach because, a true dialogue is a scary thing because you have to expose your beliefs and your ideas and what you think sometimes to attack, not a deliberate attack, but to hear other ideas that might contradict and even undermine what you think. And so to engage in that kind of dialogue, it is a scary thing. It takes a lot of courage.
And I think it's interesting. I don't know. There's 2 different types of people, I think. There's the people who want to discuss to like bash down your ideas. Like, I am right, you are wrong, here's why, and like all these other things. And then there's the people who you have a discussion about your ideas and they might disagree, but it's not conflicting and it's not harmful to each other's like emotional feelings, right? So it's weird. Like for me personally, in the experiences that I've had with both of those people, it's a beautiful thing when 2 people can have disagreements, but then talk about why they disagree and why, like all these different things, versus the person that's like, no, you're wrong, and then here's why, and then bash you down for it.
Right. And actually, to go along with that and to add in an outside text, Anatomy of Peace really shows how to do that. It's the seeing people as people and having a heart at peace. If you have a heart at war, and if you're like, oh my goodness, no, my idea is the only good idea, and your idea sucks, and this is not even like something that could change, then you're not going to get anything out of it. That's not dialogue. That's just speaking at someone. But if you have a heart at peace and you're like, okay, I'm going to listen to your ideas. I'm going to be assertive in using my mind's ear to see what you have to say, then that's where you really get into the deeper, high quality dialogue.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love how Stringfellow Bar points out how Socrates did that when he says that he never attacked, even though, he did question all of Thrasymachus' assumptions about justice.
Right.
He never attacked him as a person, and he never attacked his pretensions or his character. And that's a tough thing to do when you feel like you're being threatened. You usually respond with a reactionary defensiveness.
Right.
But to have the courage to just patiently talk through an idea without attacking the person, that's a tough thing to do.
So Socrates is not threatened. Is that kind of what you're saying? Socrates, even though someone completely disagrees with him and the light of their mind is total darkness, it says, I'm going to win and you're going to lose. Or if you win, then I lose, right? The win-lose. But Socrates doesn't see that as a threat. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well,
Socrates is never fearful that he will lose precisely because he is not trying to win.
That's so cool.
That's so cool.
So yeah, if when he is really first in what he believes and what he values, but he can engage in dialogue, ask the questions, and he's relentless in asking his gets him killed. He's relentless in asking his questions. But it also changes the entire course of Western civilization too.
Maybe with what Daniel just said, Daniel was saying there are two types of people, the yes and the no. It's a little bit like Socrates is saying yes to Thrasymachus in that he's allowing himself to go where Thrasymachus will go. He's not in an agreement of everything. Mm-hmm. So could we make maybe there's one more dimension to that. You have these people who are yes and no, but then like there's a depth where the yes is, okay, I'll go with you, but I'm also going to allow the terrain or the trolls or the golems or whoever in the actual terrain to test that idea, or maybe not even circumstances. It would be holding it up to truth, right? And saying, okay, let's go there. Does it square with truth? Mm-hmm. Something that comes to mind also with that. Sorry, do you mind if I kind of beat this just one more time? And then,
go ahead, one more.
Go right off in the sunset on a different horse. But there was this. I went to this improv class. They sent us to a convention. I'm teaching now at a residential training center, and I feel kind of out of place because I haven't been discussing with my students doing the things that I'm talking about in the same way. It's always there, but it's in a different way. So anyway, we were at this convention, and these improv people showed us a video where a guy said, okay, you have to say yes to all of the questions I'm going to pose. And he's like, is everybody okay with this? And people are like, what? So I'm going to try it with you guys. Say yes to everything I'm going to say. Are you ready for this after every question?
I guess.
Yes.
Do you want to go on an adventure?
Let's do it.
Yes.
Do you want this adventure to have a knight in shining armor?
Yes.
Do you want the knight to fight a dragon that blows big billowy smoke?
Yes.
Do you want the knight to save a princess?
Yes.
Okay, so it's basically there. Now I want you to say no to everything that I'm going to ask. Do you want to go on an adventure?
No.
Okay, it just stops right there, right?
Oh.
That's really interesting. That actually kind of reminds me of one of the points that he brings up later in, I think it's the 7th point, but it's kind of like you have to go where the discussion is taking you, and you have to be willing to go. Because if you're not willing to go and you're like, no, we have to stay right here on this specific topic, you're not going to get anything out of it. And you might, but there's so many discussions that have random tangents that then you now have this like brainchild that's amazing, right? And so if I'll quote this real quick, it says, "We should follow the argument wherever it leads." And then later it says, "The name of the game is not instructing one's fellows or even persuading them, but thinking with them and trusting the argument to lead to understanding, sometimes to very unexpected understandings." And so I think that entirely ties in what we're talking about, and even a little bit earlier, where just let it go where it's taking you, you know? And even with the example that you were talking about, Steve, is that like if we said no, and if we just stayed where we were, you know, we wouldn't know about the adventure. But being open to that, even though I don't know how you are going to end the adventure, I'm trusting you to kind of lead this discussion, or I guess in that case it was us saying yes to whatever you said, but that story.
Well, and going back a little bit to what Stephen was saying about like the new kind of people that we just talked about, where it's saying, yes, I will go with you to like see where this will go, what will happen, how will I grow, and like what will I have to accept, and what, like all that. That reminds me of Aristotle's when he's talking about the 3 different kinds of friends. You have like the ones that only want something out of you, and then you have the one person where they give you pleasure in some way or form, but only for a small moment. And then you have the perfect friend, as he says, or the best friend that you can get, and it's seeing the good from both each other and also pushing each other and like just expecting each other to be better and to do better. And like that ties into the example almost of a mentor-scholar relationship, where you have the mentor who is trying to find the best and do the best and to bring out the best of the scholar, and to not only teach them like about life, but also to grow together throughout those experiences and throughout that adventure.
Have you ever seen the movie Yes Man? That's just kind of what it reminded me of. Like, he just agrees to only say yes to everything, and it just takes him through crazy experiences, but it's always an adventure. But I don't know why that thought just came up in my head.
Well, and you have to start with wanting the adventure.
Right.
Like Stephen was just saying, once you say yes, you can have the knight in shining armor. You can have the fight with the dragon. You can have the saving of the princess. But if you don't want the adventure, none of that happens, and none of it can happen.
Right. You have to have a growth mindset. You have to be open to changing your paradigm. Right.
Yeah, trusting the argument. Well, it was in that part of the passage that Kellen read, but that's the phrase that stood out to me. I think you can only be brave enough to go on that adventure of those dangerous discussions if you trust that the argument will lead somewhere good.
Right.
Right. I'd love to bring this back to the text that we talked about last time, where Plato talks about the 3 types of souls, and it was what is it called? It's What is Good Sport, Plato's view. He talks about the 3 types of souls and how the third soul, which is kind of where you want to be, but it's instead of wanting sport for getting a medal, instead of wanting sport for the honor and glory, it's wanting sport because it's good for you and because you get connection and because you get experience, whatever, things like that. I think that entirely ties into the discussion and the dialogue. If you want to have good dialogue, you have that sort of soul that's desiring this better, this growth, this change.
You dropped this whole idea, and then we kind of moved on. I want to say a few things about doing things for their own sake, right, that you were talking about. And that when we do things for their own sake, we do listen. We want to listen. I was watching an interview from a lady. She works for NPR, and she's like, all of those listening techniques are absolutely garbage. There's no such thing as a good listening technique. But the best listening technique is just be interested in the other person. She grew up in a family where either her parents or grandparents would invite celebrities over, and they would be sitting around the table with these people all of the time. And she said, I just started to assume that everyone was interesting, no matter who they were. And so that's how she approaches her interviews, that she's sitting across from someone who is worthy of listening to, and that they have something fascinating to share. I like how Miss Cox called it. Was this her? Gods around the campfire?
Yeah.
If you consider the person next to you a god or goddess, they are someone who you might, as Lewis says, you might sooner worship than speak poorly about or think poorly about, then you're going to, if we want to talk about good dialogues, it's going to go off the charts at that point, because now you're expecting their full potential. And when you expect someone's full potential, it's limitless.
I'd love to talk a little bit more about
the mind's eye and the mind's ear.
The mind's eye and the mind's ear.
I think what he said. Well, I think what he says is one of the greatest statements. So when he says you should not be taking notes, you shouldn't be writing, you shouldn't be reading during the discussion. And he says it's not because you've decreased the number of speakers, it's because you've decreased the number of listeners.
Right.
Like as a teacher leading discussions, it was never about, he talks about that idea of equal time. It was never about getting equal time. If somebody wants to sit and listen the entire time, that is great. Because he even says it doesn't matter whose mouth gets used by the dialectical process. To quote him, it's what really matters is if everybody is listening intently.
So is listening more important part of dialogue than reading or not listening, but like talking?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think he's absolutely right that listening is far more powerful than speaking.
Right. One of my concerns with that, actually, though, because and we talked a little bit about this earlier, I think, but it's so important to listen to everybody and listen and get those ideas and get the input. But there are so many people who just take the easy way out and get that input and then just immediately use it as output instead of processing it. So emphasizing the fact that listening is so important and listen to everybody and to process it with your mind's ear instead of just listening to that. And I think that's exactly what he's saying there.
Is it for its own sake or is it for the sake of something else? When you say process it, do you mean so that you can use it or? Like,
I guess in the scenario I was using, it's, for example, I have friends who specifically with some of their parents have certain ideas, depending on where they got them. I'm not entirely sure. But then their children hear those ideas, and rather than thinking about what they as a person believe, they just repeat what their parents have said. So they're not actually processing the information in their mind or using their mind's ear to look at it and to decide what they think and what is actually truth to have that discussion. They're just taking input from their parents and using it as output, speaking to friends.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you're right. That's not listening. I think you're right on that. That's repeating what you've heard, not listening.
Right.
Yeah.
When you speak, you need to be listening to yourself.
Right.
Not just in dialogue, but when you are thinking, and I would say that is mindfulness, right? It's this thing that's supposedly alternative medicine for people nowadays. I work in a residential treatment center for girls who have extreme trauma, and if not the most effective thing for them is not medication, and it's not therapy, like sitting down and talking about your feelings and all of these psychological techniques that they use. Although those things may be helpful, the most helpful things are all alternative or considered alternative, even though they've been around for thousands of years. And one of them that they talk about a lot is mindfulness. And I've asked a lot of girls here, what is mindfulness? And they've taught me so much about mindfulness. It's when they say, oh, I'm aware of at least 3 of my senses. So maybe a touch, a taste, a smell. And they think about those in the moment rather than trying to live in all of these different places. And maybe mindfulness could be just thinking about your breathing or any of those types of things.
Right, and that goes right along with where he's talking about the scientist, if I can find this real quick. Before we resent or reject the idea that a scientist is in dialogue with the object or objects he investigates, let us observe that, like Socrates, he is humble, patient, imaginative, and deeply attentive. He listens with all 5 senses and with the mind's eye.
That just reminds me a lot of like in yoga when you say namaste, that means the best of me honors the best of you. And that's essentially what he's saying right there.
Mr. Fife, you're talking about like sitting down with somebody and like seeing them as a super interesting person and they have a story to tell, right? And so point 4 says, even these thumbs may seem guaranteed to produce bedlam, and indeed, when they are first tried, they generally do produce it. But inexperienced dancers on a ballroom floor and inexperienced skaters on the ice rink also collide. Experience brings a 6th sense in Socratic dialect too. The will of self-instance gives way the will to learn. And so, as you experience things, and everybody's experiencing something all the time, and so if you sit down with somebody and you're like, what is your experience? That opens up a whole communication of dialogue and something that you can sit down and then listen to and learn. And then you can experience your own things to then like respond or, I don't know, just to have that conversation.
Right. And that goes along with a quote that I know, I'm not sure I agree with the quote, but it's that a smart person learns from their own experiences. A genius learns from others' experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and that is, if you were going to sum up the secret of great dialogue, it is to view the other person, as Stringfellow Barr says Socrates did of Thrasymachus, that he says he treats him not as an enemy, but as a valued colleague in the mutual search for understanding. If you listened to every person in the dialogue as if they were a member of a fellow adventurer in pursuit of answers, that you're in a fellowship together and they're worth listening to for that very reason alone.
That's so interesting. That would be so hard. Like if you're in the middle of war or something like that because of ideas or something, I don't know. But to see the other person as not an enemy, but as somebody who just has different experiences and different dialogue, then that opens up a way for you to like see more to the war than just like fighting,
Yeah, that's when it becomes dialogue instead of discord.
Right.
So there's a quote in Anatomy of Peace that I'd like to bring up, and I think that it's Yusuf that says this: if we can't put an end to the violence within us, there's no hope for putting an end to the violence without. And that brings it right in. If you're in an argument or something and you're trying to, well, you wouldn't be trying to find out what the other person is thinking. Whereas if you have a heart of peace, if you're seeing them as a person, as a fellow adventurer, then that's where the true learning can happen, the true dialogue.
Well, and in Anatomy of Peace, it talks about the boxes of like an argument or something like that. And it just turns into a circle of people seeing each other as an object who's conflicting with them and disagreeing with them and fighting with them. It's like, I forgot the names, but the lawnmower and the...
Right, and
or mowing the lawn and his wife.
Yeah.
That's collusion,
Yeah. Collusion, that's what it is. But it's like that's the exact point right there, is if you're just seeing these people as objects in disagreements, then you're never going to get anywhere or do anything with that argument, because they're just an obstacle that is in the way and not a person with experience and a person that can have dialogue with you and to like figure out a situation.
Yep. And that's when you and again, you already quoted this part earlier, but that's when you reach higher levels of friendship with people. When you truly listen to one another, you're actively seeking each other's good, the good for others. And that's the highest level of friendship.
That's so cool.
And good meaning what?
The things that all men seek. Yeah, you got to. That's a Nicomachean Ethics. That's next week, right?
It's interesting that you talk about that about friendship, because you go to Rule 10 and it talks about the laughter in discussions, and there's been times where I've gotten cut off from laughing in discussions, and and I've had some very fun times with the plays that we did with Mr. Fife, and they were absolutely hilarious, and they were totally about Socrates and fun stuff like that.
Oh yeah, if you're not laughing during a Socratic discussion, you are doing it wrong.
Right.
If you're not finding the ridiculousness of the human experience as you're talking about things, you're missing the point. Yeah. So whoever got you in trouble for having laughter in your discussions, just ignore them. Just kidding. Listen to them.
Improv class that I went to, those people really know how to listen because they get absolutely focused in on the moment, and they're not trying to be funny. They're just they're so in the zone with each other that it's hilarious, terribly funny. Like they have another game they played with us, and they're like, okay, everybody's, they had this little sing-song dance thing, and they're like, hey, we're all going to do a dance, and the next person's going to tell us what we're going to dance with, what part of the body we're going to dance with. And they came to me, and I'm like, eyeballs. People were dancing with their eyeballs for 10 seconds, and at the end of it, one lady said to this guy, you are so good with dancing with your eyeballs. And it was just like, okay, that's it. Those people have the special sauce. Goodness. They're totally, they buy in, and they go on the adventure together. And their number one rule is yes, right? They say yes, but then they have a follow-up word. And they just say yes and. Because if you just say yes, then you're the yes man, right? Right, Tim?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
If you say yes and, now they're contributing to the adventure, right?
Right.
It's not just the person, Sam Gamgee for 2.5 books, he's just like, yes, master, yes, master, yes, master.
Right.
And then at some point, Sam's like, yes, and I know you can't do it, I'm gonna carry you. Or I know you told me to leave, and I'm coming anyway. And then we start to see a Sam emerge as a human, right? And that's, right. I remember one dialogue or a class, professor came to me, he's like, I need more from you. This class, I'm losing the class. I need some more from you. I know you're trying, but do some more. And about 40 minutes into the class, as I remember it, he looked at me like this. More. And I couldn't give him anything. And I think he probably gave up on me. It was a terrible semester from then on, right? No, but that's kind of it, right? This experience takes time. It took me a year of doing Socratic dialogue before I felt like I could say something in the discussion and give the yes and response rather than the, oh yeah, I agree with Tim. Oh yeah, I agree with Daniel. Right. Oh yeah, I agree with Kellen. So that's kind of a necessary part of this. And if you're at that stage, it's okay. And then you go, maybe you contribute a little bit when your master is in trouble, and now you're called upon to bear something more than maybe you think you can bear at the time. So.
Right. That's awesome. I think it's so cool what ends up coming out of these discussions, right? It's not just you changing your life, but if you're having these discussions with people who are also in the same mindset as like this discussion base, like the connections and the friendships that you build through these discussions is crazy. I remember my sophomore year, I took a Lewis class from Miss Cox, and she opened up, like the whole class was just based on this discussion format. And we would read for a few minutes, and then we'd discuss exactly what we read. And that was the whole class. And I had so much fun. I learned so much, and I made so many connections with the people who were in that class who I wouldn't have normally talked to, or I wouldn't have even like recognized in the hallway. And that's kind of a rude thing to say, but it's like the reality. But there were so many different types of people that came together in that moment to have that discussion and to like grow together and to have that yes and mindset. And we all went on an adventure and we grew together.
I have a question, because we keep something that is said a lot is that humans really need connection, and we need to talk to other people and stuff. How is that in relation to dialogue? Is it that we need dialogue because it creates human connection, or do we need human connection because it creates dialogue and thinking? What are your thoughts on that?
Kellen, are you going back on what you said earlier? do it for its own sake. It's because it is good. And for me, that is what good is. It's something that's good, not because it earns us a reward in any other sphere. We know it's good. Why do we eat food? Well, it's good for our bodies. Why do we discuss? Right. It's good for our souls. We have to connect our souls with other people's souls. And we have to do it for its own sake. And it is food.
Right.
Yes. And I don't know if there's really very many greater ways to connect with other people than that joint search for answers, amusing each other, benefiting each other, like making use of one another. None of those form a connection as deep and as lasting and genuine as the search for truth together. And Stringfellow Barr even says we can never live holy human lives without a genuine converse between men.
Right.
Cicero, when he's wrote his essay on friendship, he said, what good would it be to see all the wonders of if you could fall through the universe and see all the beautiful sights and wonders, what good would it be to see all those things if you had no friend to tell it to afterwards?
Right.
Yeah, if there was no one to ever talk to, something would be missing from our greatest experiences.
Right.
So I had the chance, we had a 24-mile drive. So the person who probably did the most to set the culture at Paradigm in the first few years, Sean Fletcher, if you guys love what's going on at Paradigm, he was the foundation of it. And I learned everything good I learned from him. But probably one of the greatest experiences of my life is I carpooled every day with Steve Fife and Sean Fletcher. So to and from work, we talked about the ideas that we'd read and talked about every day at Paradigm, before and after school, every single day for 7 to 9 years.
Wow.
And to this day, like whenever we all get back together in Utah, we go for a drive to get a burger or milkshake or something. And it brings back all those memories of we'll hit spots in the road where just because we hit a place, we'll remember an epiphany that we had together, like a collective epiphany. And I don't know if Steve, you might remember it differently, but and then like that camaraderie and just how awesome those insights were come flooding back. And so it's fun. Just different spots of the drive will trigger memories of all those great experiences.
That is so cool.
It's fantastic.
This is my favorite one to tell. I was listening to your podcast when you guys were interviewed by Ava and Dallin, and somebody, I don't even know if it was one of them or one of you, said, the truth won't hurt you or something. And I'm just like, oh, I don't believe that at all. There was one time I had a girl in my class that, I can't even believe that I thought this way, but this is how I thought.
I actually know what you're going to say, Steve. I remember this.
She just needs to conform. She just needs to give. And so I think I said something like, she just needs to be humbled. And Sean, he asked one question, and I know exactly on the road where we were. I looked over, there was a barn with a blue roof right when he said, isn't forced humility humiliation? And that's all he said. And it got really quiet.
Right. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I needed that truth. My mind had darkness in it. I felt like I needed to humble her as if I was some kind of a god or something to control her. But that's not my place. That's not my that's not the purpose of a mentor. The purpose of a mentor is to have light in their own mind. And Sean understood that. And he was constantly bringing us to light. He has an uncanny, I don't know if you guys have seen it to that degree at Paradigm since. He's not trying to instruct his fellows. He's in the dialogue, and he's in it constantly, and it's a beautiful thing. There were times, Simmons, we'd sit in front of one of our houses, and our wives probably wondered if we were ever going to come in.
Fife one time just said that when he was teaching me 2 years ago, he was just saying, like, with not just my discussions and everything, but with my writing, to think about who you're writing to And once I kind of got out of this mindset of I'm writing to a professor, I'm writing like I'm in a movie, you know. When I started writing to my colleagues, then that's when my writing really improved.
I remember one time in Feif's class, we had to turn in our essays, and then he had us read our essays in front of the whole class. And the way I had formatted my essay was like MLA format, like really planned out the way that it's supposed to be planned out. And he told me, he was like, are you writing this essay because you need to turn in the essay, or did you write it because you actually cared about it? And I was like, because I needed to turn it in. And like, I never realized the power of that question that he asked me until recently, like just a few months ago when I was writing a paper, and I was like, wait, I don't like writing all that much, so why am I writing this paper? And it's because I wanted to, and because I was so interested about the topic that I was writing about. And that question from 7th grade till my it took me to my junior year for me to figure out what Fife was asking me and what he was inviting me to participate in. And like this moment I realized that was the moment that I think I joined into dialogue for at least a brief moment, or like even now. It's crazy how people just invite you to join this dialogue, but then you have to make that choice to understand how to join it, right?
Right. You have to be assertive and very active in purposefully joining the dialogue. It's very much an action that you are taking.
Right. Well, that reminds me of The Hobbit, where, what's his name, Bilbo? Like at the very beginning, he's like, why are these people in my house? Like, what is going on? But the second he was like, all right, we're going on an adventure, right? That's when he started to learn, and that's when he started to take in those lessons.
Yeah.
We try to write for the sake of grammar, or the sake of syntax, or the sake of all of these other things. And really, the heart of writing is write what you believe. And when you write what you believe, then these things that happen, I like how you guys say, that's when I entered into dialogue. Yeah, you'll start to enter into dialogue. I'm going to start using that, entering into dialogue. I like it better than getting in the zone. The zone's been used by sports, right? But entering into dialogue is like, okay, I accept the mission, I accept the call, I'm in the adventure, and you go with it wherever it takes you, right? And the funny thing is, the adventure is not even outside of our heads. It's nothing we've done. I've moved a total of like 4 inches, maybe this whole time. My arms are flailing around. I'm glad that you guys can't see them, but the idea is we can travel into these places, and I almost believe that, maybe I do believe it, that our minds, they start to overlap with other people, maybe almost like a Venn diagram. So the adventure starts to create these connections, almost like telepathy. And we can predict what other people are going to say. Simmons, every time I look at him, I'm thinking, oh, he's probably heard me say these things a million times.
Hey, it's been a couple of years. You got some new ideas. We're good.
But yeah, you start to get to the point where your thoughts are your thoughts, but they're also not. Arneson and Cox came over.
Right.
They visited me here at school last week, and we talked for 4 hours. I mean, it just never stopped. It was awesome. And
goodness.
I talked to Simmons right after. Did I call you right after or the day after?
I think it was like the day after, yeah.
And I said, you know what? You were with me in that discussion, and other people were with me, and that's what it does. It like, in a bad way, you know, other people or an ideology possesses us and turns us into a puppet on a string. But I think in a good way, dialogue possesses us, and we start to have Aristotelian type thought processes where we're like, oh, here's how Aristotle would respond to that, or here's how Simmons would respond to that, and they become part of us. And I don't think it might be in a bad way. I mean, dogma is always something that you can be wary of, but the dogma seen in a different light is doctrine that you can base your life on, that makes your life better.
Right.
dogma is more like a mangled child or like a mangled body without an arm and a leg. But doctrine is this whole person that embodies truth.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. At the end of our episodes, we like to ask our guests one challenge that you want our listeners to do, and then one takeaway that they should get out of this episode.
My challenge to everybody listening is every person you meet, ask a real question and then listen. And you'll be amazed what you learn.
I think mine was said better by Kellen. So Kellen, would you please say it for me? Just kidding. It was get into the dialogue. I think Daniel kind of said something similar to that as well. And then the takeaway is Thrasymachus is your colleague. Simmons, I really appreciate how you articulated that. That was really well said.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for joining us. This was an absolutely lovely discussion that we've had. It was amazing to hear some of your car discussion stories, as well as just talk about some amazing ways to enter into the dialogue.
Well, thank you. This was a pleasure.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. If you would like to contact us, follow us on Instagram at The Paradigm Pod, or you can email us at podcast@paradigmhigh.org. And don't forget to keep engaging in the great conversation of ideas.
Welcome back to the Paradigm Podcast.
We did eat Vegemite on toast for breakfast the whole week.
I was talking to my mom about comedians.